Good afternoon. It's a Friday, February 3rd, 2023, and welcome to another edition of my NFL Exit Reports. This gives people a look into my mindset for each of the teams, and it's also therapeutic for me as well to go back, look at my process, look and see what I missed, what I may have gotten right, and a look toward the future for each of the NFL teams. And today we're doing the Miami Dolphins. This will be a solo show. The last show I had was with Sharp Clark. I hope you enjoyed that one on the Jacksonville Jaguars. We have more guests to follow. But Miami was a fascinating study. Think back to a year ago. Brian Flores' team had just come off a whole bunch of wins to almost make the playoffs at the end of the season after a very slow 2021 start. And then he gets fired. And that was really sent shockwaves around the community, the NFL analyst community. I, for one, was surprised at that and thought that this was not a good situation. Whatever chemistry or lack of chemistry between the owner, the GM, the coach that existed, I thought this was a sideways move. They hire a former San Francisco one-year coordinator, but he'd been in the league since 2005, Mike McDaniel, and he grew on me during the offseason last year. There was something about him. I knew he'd probably learn on the job as a first-year head coach, but there was something about him that was quirky and something I liked, and I couldn't quite put my finger to it at the beginning. I did know that he was offensive minded, and Brian Flores had that defense rocking and rolling. So this was going to be a culture change for a team that needed a change. They weren't running the ball well. Their offensive line just wasn't built correctly. It was one of the weaker offensive lines, and they didn't know quite what they had in Tua at quarterback, but they were hoping for big things. And I'm a big fan of Tua to begin with, because I think he throws certain types of passes, slant patterns really well. He has accuracy. I think he can throw the deep ball better than most people believe. That's a personal opinion, but he doesn't have to throw the deep ball if he has the right kind of talent surrounding him. And that's really one of the things that Miami set forth to do right away. Made that massive blockbuster trade for Tyreek Hill. Kansas City got a lot of draft choices. Miami, for the first time in a long time, they only had 4 draft choices. That's all they drafted in the 2022 draft. But obviously, you have to consider Tyreek Hill part of that draft trade, part of that draft capital. So then they go out and get Mostert from San Francisco, where McDaniel used to coach. They get a couple of other bodies, and all of a sudden, between Waddle, between Tyreek Hill, hopefully revamping of the pass game, there was going to be a little bit more offense on display for the 2022 season. Now, the rest of the offseason, not too much that went on. And I was flip-flopping back and forth. Do I like them? Do I not like them? Where am I exactly on Miami? They got the offensive rebuild, as the banner shows at the bottom, but defensively, they were losing Brian Flores' expertise as a defensive-minded coach. And at the same time, we saw that there were injury concerns. There was an Achilles injury to their lead cornerback, Byron Jones. We figured he would be missing part of the season, at least part of 2022 in rehab. And as it turns out, we didn't know it at the time, he missed the entire 2022 season, and that set the defense back as well. So the first thing I did after digesting all this and making a snap decision early on season wins, which I'll talk about in a few minutes, is look at my keys. I put together what I thought their offense was going to look like, what their defense was going to look like, what my sack numbers were going to look like. I put together some pass defense numbers. I put together how I thought they would look in the first quarter. And I had my seasonal keys on my team sheets. And the very first seasonal key, I figured there would be regression with the pass rush. They have some young talent. They didn't really add anybody. The division was getting a little bit tougher. The Jets had improved in the draft. Buffalo was my number 1 rated team. New England is fundamentally sound, and they had a second-year quarterback. I figured that the pass rush would regress. They had 48 in 2021. I projected 41, and that's about what they would end up hitting, but there would be a little bit drop in that area. That to me was a given. The second key that I have listed here is special team concerns. The reason I put that in there is because Sanders, their kicker, had an off year in 2021. I looked at some of their metrics. It really wasn't very good in terms of their overall punt return and kick return numbers. I thought they needed an infusion of talent and a little bit more attention to detail in special teams. It's something I harp on all summer long and during the season. I don't really care, and people have said to me, wow, Ron, you really focus on special teams, and I do. It doesn't matter to me that much if you're 9th rated in special teams or if you're 19th rated in special teams. What matters to me is, are you an outlier? Are you one of the bottom 4, 5, 6 teams? Are you one of the top 4, 5, 6 teams? And Miami was trending toward the bottom. And so that was a concern that I wanted to see how it played out in those first 4 games of 2022. It was something that I thought could end up holding them back. I talked about the potential loss of Byron Jones at cornerback. I thought there'd be at least a little regression in terms of their ability to defend the pass. And then finally, even though Mike McDaniel was an offensive mind, Brian Flores was a defensive mind, I thought there'd be offensive line improvement. But talent-wise, they were still a slightly below average, in my opinion. They didn't have enough ammunition to help themselves in the draft with a draft of just 4, and they concentrated a little bit more defensively with those 4 bodies that they drafted. And in free agency, they didn't do enough there. They had some young talent that they hoped would grow, but overall, I was a little worried about the offensive line. So I went into the season, I made an early play under the 9 wins, I believe, against Miami because of the coaching change, because of the uncertainty that was going on. They had a lot of room that they still needed to improve in terms of the offensive line, in terms of the running situation. There were concerns defensively. By the end of the summer, I was trusting Mike McDaniel a little more. I actually bought off just about every penny of that play to go for an over 8.5 with some juice there. I was willing to take a sandwich or a pizza loss in that area because I kind of had shifted my opinion a little bit in terms of where Miami was, and I wanted to be more on the sidelines. So essentially, it would be a no play unless they won exactly 9 wins. So let's look at how the season played out. We saw Tua. We were very excited about Tua early. His accuracy was off the charts. And then he got concussed not once, but twice during the season, to the extent that Miami ended up going into a tailspin. They couldn't repeat the early start, which was achieved with a raw head coach and against a pretty tough opening 4-game schedule. But Miami looked like the real deal for a while, but people figured them out defensively. There was a drop without Tua. They did sign Jeff Wilson, who ironically was also in San Francisco with McDaniel in 2021. But in 2022, they got Jeff Wilson during the season for a mid-season trade of a draft pick. And so the run game was acceptable. It wasn't dynamic, but it was acceptable. But unfortunately, both Jeff Wilson and Mostert, both of them got hurt at various times during the season, especially at the end of the season. And what we saw is a less than healthy run offense. It contributed, but wasn't contributing to the greatest extent. The offensive line held up pretty well with the scheme. They only allowed 35 sacks. I had them allowing 39. So they were probably a little bit better than what I expected in terms of holding up. But it didn't help Tua in terms of the fact that he got hit a lot, even if he wasn't sacked a lot. And other than Tyreek Hill, there were some hit and misses in the offensive game plan. And I thought in some respects, Mike Gesicki and their second string tight end, they were used, but they were used a little bit less than I would have liked to see. I would have liked to see Tua and the other quarterbacks use them a little bit more to create mismatches mismatches down the field. I thought the tight end play was a little bit underutilized. But bottom line is, without Byron Jones and without Brian Flores as head coach / defensive acumen in the room, the defense did suffer. They allowed, I believe, over 68%, or let's say 67 to 68% on the year. That's 2 out of every 3 passes, more than that being completed. It caused some problems down the road. They gave up 33, 23, 37, 28, and 23 down the stretch, 5 of their last 6 games, until they did win their final game to get into the playoffs, 11-6 over the Jets. The Jets had a massive offensive problems by that time, as documented in a previous video. So basically what we're saying here is Miami was showing signs of regression defensively. Without Tua, things weren't the same. And yet, if you look back at the season, you'd have to say that it was generally a success for Miami. Success for me because I was able to hedge the play. They won exactly 9 games. I made some season win total money out of that. But that really, the bigger issue is that despite some issues with injuries to the secondary and to Tua, this team, for example, Buffalo, they played Buffalo absolutely tight. All 3 matchups, including a playoff matchup, a sloppy playoff game matchup, where the final score was 34-31. So even with Skylar Thompson, if you can believe this stat line, 18 out of 45 is what Skylar Thompson was. So that's 40% completions, and yet Miami put up 31 points and almost beat Buffalo, partly because Josh Allen turnover woes continued, and they kept Miami into the game. But Miami has had a good game plan against Buffalo, so I give them credit. One other thing I want to mention before I talk about where I feel they are right now is one of my concerns, and I mentioned that early on. I'm going to pull that one up just one more time, and that's the special team concerns. They've got to fix that now. Now, Sanders as a kicker was better, but the punt return offense to defensive numbers, keep in mind these numbers: 5.8 offensive punt return average, 10.4 defensive punt return average allowed. And it was worse for kickoff returns. Not even 19 yards per kickoff return offensively, and a very, very poor, nearly 28 yards, 27.8 yards per kick return. Miami, if you're going to win some close games, if you're going to try to get into the playoffs and get a higher seed, if you're going to not break down in a playoff game, you have to fix your special teams. They need to have an eye, not only in free agency, but with their draft picks and with their after-date draft picks, on people who can contribute on special teams and to go ahead and make this a more complete unit. So there were pluses and minuses for them. So what's up next? What's left for Miami? They're going to face, it's still going to be a tough division. Let's put it that way. The Jets had an amazing draft, and the needle's pointing up, even though we don't know who their quarterback is going to be. New England is fundamentally sound. We'll be talking about them next video. We'll get into them a little deeper. And Buffalo's not going away. They have some problems they need to fix. Maybe Josh Allen needed to do too much. But that's 6 games in a very tough division that they're going to face. It looks like Byron Jones, from what I'm reading as prepping for this show, it looks like he may be gone. I read an article that said he may have played his last down with Miami, which would have been in 2021. If that's the case, they've got to focus on signing a key free agent, a veteran in the secondary, and they've got to do some things to improve in the secondary. And here's the thing. One thing they did that should have an immediate effect is that they have a new defensive coordinator as of a couple of days ago. It took a little while. There were 4 days in negotiations. But Vic Fangio, who was a very, very good defensive coordinator for the Chicago Bears, and with Denver, he wasn't a very good head coach, but his defenses performed above expectations. Vic Fangio is the Miami Dolphin defensive coordinator, and I think that's an exceptional move for the Dolphins. It's really because of that I'm cautiously optimistic about what's in store for the Miami Dolphins for 2023. When they have enough draft picks, and they're not going to have, they've got some problems in the drafting world. I'll get into that. When they have enough draft picks, they generally do decently, but they're going to have to make their money. They're going to have to build their roster in free agency, I believe. I still think they need a dynamite offensive lineman to go with what they have with the youth on the offensive line. They have to make tight end decisions with some of their veterans. But other than that, it's really the back seven on defense that needs some immediate attention. And if they do that with Vic Fangio, who's probably going to improve the defense anyway, then I think we have a chance to see Miami repeat and go in the playoffs. Now, keep in mind, they do not have a first round pick, and it's not due to trades. It's due to tampering. We know that Miami's kind of stuck their neck out in a couple of situations that they shouldn't have last year. The NFL said, you're gone. You don't have a first round pick. They also do not have a fourth round pick, and they don't have a fifth round pick as well. So it's these key off-season decisions that are going to determine whether or not my cautious optimism is rewarded. But at least right now, I think the needle could still be pointing up, and I hope Tua stays healthy for 2023. That's it for the Miami off-season report, my exit report. I'm going to be back. The next one is going to be with another special guest. I will have on the show, I will have Jeff Dawson from the East Coast Sports Investors. If you've heard me, I've been a guest on his show. Now he gets to be a guest with me. He has his pulse, his finger right on what's going on in the New England market. Jeff and I are going to break down New England, what happened 2022 and what to look forward to in the next exit video. So until then, thank you for watching. Please subscribe, and we will see you down the road.